Alrighty, let's get started. Just wanted to keep everything on time. So my name is Sarah Bana. I'm at Chapman University in Southern California, and this is joint work with Kevin Boudreau, who's at Northeastern and the NBER. The title of this paper could probably use some workshopping, so I'd love to hear your suggestions. It's a little on the long side. It's called AI-Enabled Job Markets and Market Participation, AI Aversion, and Job Seekers' Expectations of How AI Shapes Competition. It's a mouthful, but I really think the concept is pretty straightforward and really excited to hear your feedback and have some discussions about it afterward. So the motivation is really that AI is pervasive these days in the labor market, and it increasingly mediates job market matching. So more than 90% of large U.S. firms are using digital automation of some sort in hiring. These capabilities are evolving really broadly. So if you think about it, the earlier generations of these technologies were working on, for example, these concepts of filtering out people who didn't have the appropriate experience, or let's say a college degree. And now things are improving in terms of the capabilities. So they're using things like semantic embeddings, looking at how similar different job titles are across different firms, or now using generative AI tools to try and understand how similar two roles are or how similar two candidates are for a position. And so there's a lot of room for the research to improve in this dimension, right? So Netflix, for example, is quite good at recommending us shows that we might want to watch. Our job market platforms, I know Andrew from LinkedIn is here. Is Andrew here? Andrew is here from LinkedIn, and we might want LinkedIn to have similar capabilities to Netflix in terms of recommending candidates to us. One might argue it's not there yet, but that's really where a lot of the research has been focusing in the space. It's on technical improvements to algorithms on job matching platforms. However, not everybody clicks through a recommendation on, for example, Netflix. I'm not necessarily going to watch that show. I might have a lot of other reasons why I choose one show or another. And that's a behavioral effect that I think is very important to take into account. And so what we're going to do in this paper is think about behavioral implications of job matching algorithms using, or job matching platforms using algorithms. So the research question we're going to ask is, how do job seekers respond to algorithmic recommendations? And this is happening really widely. So on the right, you can see that LinkedIn, for example, is sending me a series of job picks for me. And so this is happening very broadly. And so we want to understand how job seekers are responding to these recommendations. So like I said, the research question, how do job seekers respond to algorithmic recommendations? The way that we're going to answer this question is by designing a field experiment. In this field experiment, job seekers are going to receive job recommendations via email. And they're going to be placed in one of three conditions. The control condition will provide no information about how that particular recommendation was generated for the job seeker. In the AI treatment, the recommendation will come with an additional note that says that the recommendation was generated by an AI matching algorithm. And then finally, in the human condition, the job seeker will be told that the recommendation was generated by an employer. Importantly, for this experiment to work on disclosure, right, disclosing the AI-based recommendation, then what's going to need to happen is the process by which the recommendation was generated would have to be the same across these three conditions. And so that's what we're going to do. All of these recommendations are going to be coming from the same algorithm. The way it works on our end is the employer actually suggests keywords to us for each of the different jobs. We implement that keyword matching in algorithmic form. And so both or all of the statements, all of the conditions are true. And so we're able to hold the technical quality of the recommendation constant and only vary the disclosure, the information that the job seeker receives about that recommendation. And so what do we find? We find that job seekers are much less likely to participate in these job markets that are algorithmically mediated. So that could be, or that's a result in and of itself. And a lot of the other literature will argue that this is a preference-based idea, right? That this is this idea of what's called algorithmic aversion. The innovation that we're going to be making in this paper is we find evidence that job seekers have these rational expectations over different structures of competition in the presence of AI-enabled markets. And so that's going to explain at least some of the way that these job seekers are behaving. They're behaving differently because they have different expectations of how the labor market is working under the AI treatment. And so we're going to show that using 3 empirical tests, which all show that these job seekers are reacting differently to AI recommendations. What does that mean? Well, in the AI treatment, what we find is that ex ante, stronger candidates are disproportionately opting out of the AI-based job market. And so that's consistent with the expectation that AI produces lower quality match predictions. Because if you thought that you were the top candidate for the job, then you would want to participate more in if you thought that you were the top candidate for the job. But in the AI treatment, these job seekers are believing that the match quality is lower, and so then they have a lower probability of actually getting the job. We also find that job seekers with larger professional networks are less likely to participate. And so that's consistent with the expectation that these job seekers have that AI relies on different information sources. And so if I thought that I was operating in a process where it was a very human process and I like to interact with humans, then I might prefer that process to a process where I'm operating with an algorithm, and I might be disadvantaged, for example, in that process that's operating with an algorithm. So they either believe that the screening is being done differently or potentially that other steps of the process are happening differently as well. And then finally, in the AI treatment, we find that participation is completely unrelated to the number of local competitors. So that is really distinct from both the human and the control treatment, where as the email gets sent to more people, they become less and less likely to apply. And yet in the AI treatment, they don't have the same conception of the size of the labor market, presumably believing that the email or the recommendation is being sent to more people, therefore disadvantaging them in the process or making it less likely for them to operate in this process. And so this is just a summary. I'll go into this more deeply. But I think if you believe any of the 3 empirical tests that we show, then you can understand that this has major implications for both platform designers and firms. First and foremost, that the AI disclosure on the job market side is not neutral for participation. It really does change the composition and the pool size of the applicant pool. At this time, it looks like job seekers believe that AI leads to a worse equilibrium. And so that has really big implications for platform designers in particular. That is, they can show that they're using certain inputs, changing the expectation of what job seekers think about the match quality. They can be transparent about the data that they're using to generate these recommendations. And then finally, I think that we all prefer to be perceived as unique in the world. And sometimes when AI is being used in the process, we perceive that to be flattened as opposed to broadened in terms of our attributes. And so they can signal recognition of individual strengths in that process. This also has implications for policymakers and regulators. There are a lot of new regulations with respect to disclosure mandates. So, for example, the Illinois AI Video Interview Act and the NYC AI and Hiring Act, these processes require disclosure by firms and platforms of AI use. The disclosure actually ends up changing the perceived rules of competition. And so if this is not an AI aversion story, this is a competition story, then I think that that has implications for how firms are operating and for how policymakers imagine these processes moving, these disclosure rules moving forward. So I'm just going to talk us through a very quick job seeker payoff function to help us fix ideas about what we're thinking about in this paper. And then also to put some Greek letters on the page, because it wouldn't be a talk without one. So you might participate in a job market if the expected value of participating is greater than or equal to an outside option. Now, we're not wedded to the particular variables in this process, but we're going to just write a very simple characterization, which is you would participate if the expected value is greater than the outside option, which means that the expected value is going to be evaluated over the perceived probability of being hired, the wage, the application cost and effort, and then the outside option. So if I think I'm going to if I have a higher likelihood of being hired, then I'm more likely to participate in the process. If I have a lower likelihood of being hired, I would be less likely to participate in the process. And so what we're focusing on here is that P, that perceived probability of being hired. And so that's where we really think that the AI treatment is changing the game. Because what it's doing is it's changing people's perceptions of their probability of being hired in very reasonable ways. So what are the reasonable ways? Well, if you have a different matching technology, then that might change the payoff function. And so the three directions we're going to go in are thinking about match quality, job seekers' expectations about match quality, prediction source, so what information you're relying on to make the decision, and then finally scale, the size of the candidate pool. And so all those three things are going to affect your perceived probability of being hired, and therefore change the rules of the game, and therefore change your probability of participating. And so let me talk you through very quickly the experimental design. So we want to estimate job seekers' response to AI versus human recommendations. And that means that we want to disentangle the behavioral response from the technical quality or the efficiency of the algorithm. And so we want to hold constant match quality jobs and applicants. And then finally, this is a real labor market platform that we're operating on at a university. And so we do also want to be truth-telling. These are real people and real jobs. And so we want to participate. We don't want any deception in the process. And so we've got a field experiment in this university job matching platform. This is primarily short-term, high-skilled jobs, and they're launched over a 3-week period. These are the types of jobs that this platform is hiring for. So some of them are technical jobs like full stack engineer. Some of them are less technical like video design, visual design, marketing strategy, and psychology. So it's a range of jobs. And we're going to define the risk set or the participants of the applicant pool using both the machine and the human. So we ask the employer for each of these roles to choose keywords that will help pick the candidates that receive the recommendation. And we execute that by matching the LinkedIn profiles of these particular candidates. And so how does it work? Well, the job seekers receive an email with the job title, a 1-line description, and a button to click through for info and apply. And so we have these 3 conditions: the AI matching algorithm, the human, and the control, which has no information. And in the case of the AI matching treatment and the human matching treatment, these are the treatment variables. So I'm going to focus now on just the results. Happy to share the paper with you all if you're interested. So what we find is that participation is much lower in the AI treatment compared to the control group. That's what the control group is, the omitted category here. Job seekers are 2.5 percentage points less likely to apply for a given role. This is off a baseline percentage of about 9 percentage points. And so this is about 25 to 30% decrease in the probability of participating. We also see this if we control for the wage that's shown in the job posting, and for job seeker characteristics, and for job posting fixed effects. So that's a pretty consistent decrease. And so now I'm going to talk about the 3 mechanisms that we talked through. So let me actually focus on the second one, because I'm appear to be running short on time. So let's talk about prediction sources. So AI and human recommendations may signal different evaluation criteria. AI may prioritize codified or quantifiable attributes, whereas humans may value professional networks and soft signals. And so professional networks represent investments in human-valued signals. And so what we can see is when we compare the candidates who have applied or who are applying based on their number of LinkedIn connections, we see that in the control group and in the human group, the candidates with more connections are more likely to click through for the role. But we don't see that effect in the case of the AI group, which suggests that these people are relatively disadvantaged in this process. We see a very similar result when we think about the scale of the recommendation. If people believe that the recommendation is being sent to many more people. And so this just has a lot of broad implications for what people think of when they realize a process is involving algorithms. So I think I have a couple minutes for questions. Great. Let me go to conclusions. Go ahead, Nan.
Okay, so I think I got my wires crossed, so I'd like a little bit of clarification.
Yeah, of course.
Earlier you mentioned that people who are applying with greater networks have an aversion to the AI-mediated treatment, correct?
Yes.
So how does your experiment account for that type of aversion? Or does it?
Yeah, so we're randomly assigning the emails, the different conditions to applicants who have different network sizes, right? So you can have multiple different job seekers with different network sizes. And so that's randomized, right? And so if we see that somebody who's very well connected, you, for example, might be less likely to apply compared to somebody who is equally well connected in the AI treatment or in the control treatment, then we're seeing different behaviors across those people. And so then that's heterogeneity across different network sizes.
Do you see any signs that point to motivation? Because when it comes to applying for a job, the most obvious motivation is to make money and to advance your career, right?
Yeah.
So if you see people with a high network avoiding a particular action, I'm assuming, and it's an assumption here, that they're doing this behavior because they do not believe it's going to advance their career in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
So when it comes to your results, do you see a tendency towards one direction or the other with respect to advancing your career, making more money, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so I can answer that in a couple of different ways. So I'll start and then we can continue offline. But the first one is that the people with larger networks in the control group are actually more likely to apply.
Okay.
And so we see that because if you think about it, college students' LinkedIn profiles, their investment in LinkedIn is a signal of them potentially trying to get a job somewhere in general, right? And so in both the human and the control group, we see a greater probability in the tendency to apply for people with larger networks. It's in the AI treatment that we see a decrease in that effect. And so what it's saying is that those people don't perceive the AI recommendation as good of an option as they would another sort of process. Well, we can continue. Yeah. I want to be conscious of time. Thank you.